No one played with the billionaire's child in school, until one black girl came. That is not just a phrase, not just a title on a screen, but a true story that cuts across wealth, race, loneliness, and the courage of a single act of kindness. Picture this: a boy born into unimaginable riches, the kind of fortune most people could never dream of. His last name was printed on skyscrapers, whispered in political circles, and celebrated in the glossy pages of magazines. To the outside world, his life looked perfect, almost untouchable. But inside the walls of his private school, he was anything but admired. This boy, Daniel, carried with him a quiet burden. He had one leg shorter than the other, a difference that set him apart in a place where children can be the harshest judges. Every day he walked into classrooms filled with polished shoes, expensive haircuts, and inherited confidence, yet he was the one always left behind. In the cafeteria, he sat alone at the end of long tables while the chatter of other children rose like a wall he could never climb. At recess, the basketball passed from hand to hand, but never to him. Laughter echoed across the playground, but it was never his. Teachers, grateful for the millions his father had donated, smiled politely but turned their eyes when they saw him sitting by himself. The cruelest part wasn't the words. It was the silence, the deliberate absence of invitation. Day after day, Daniel endured the quiet humiliation of being invisible in plain sight. To be born into extraordinary wealth but stripped of ordinary companionship was a contradiction he learned to carry in silence. Then, one ordinary Monday morning, a new student walked through the school's polished glass doors. Her name was Layla. She came from a side of the city most of these children had never even visited, a world of small apartments, corner stores, and families stretched thin by bills. She did not wear designer shoes or carry the latest phone. Her backpack was patched and worn, but her presence was strong. She looked around that classroom, saw the clusters of children who had already decided who was worthy of their company, and then her eyes fell on Daniel. She noticed what others chose to ignore, the way his tray sat untouched, the way no one called his name. While the rest of the room moved on with its unspoken rules, she broke them with a simple choice. She sat down beside him. A hush fell over the nearest tables. Whispers began, eyes widened. But she didn't care. She greeted him, asked about the book in his hands, and when he looked up, startled, she smiled. That moment, so small to some, was monumental to him. It was the first time in years that someone saw him as more than a billionaire's child with a limp. It was the first time someone chose to sit with him, not out of pity, but out of genuine human kindness. What began with one chair pulled out at a lunch table would go on to challenge the power of wealth, the cruelty of silence, and the unspoken rules of privilege. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what happened next is a story you will not forget. Daniel Langston was the only son of a powerful magnate whose fortune stretched across oil, real estate, and politics. To the outside world, his life was painted in gold. His father's name was etched onto skyscrapers and whispered in government halls. People imagined that Daniel must have lived like a prince, carried through life on a cushion of wealth. But inside his world, the truth was far different. Daniel was born with one leg shorter than the other, a difference that set him apart in a school where perfection was prized and cruelty often went unchecked. He struggled to keep up with the games other children played, and he carried the weight of whispers everywhere he went. They called him spoiled, even though they never truly spoke to him. They called him weak, though none of them had ever known his strength. To them, he was untouchable, not out of respect, but out of rejection. In the cafeteria, seats emptied around him as though his presence were a curse. His tray sat untouched while laughter echoed from the other tables. At recess, the balls passed quickly from hand to hand, always skipping him. No one asked if he wanted to play. No one asked if he was okay. Even the teachers, whose salaries were supplemented by the donations of his father, looked past him. They praised his last name, his father's generosity, but they rarely spoke to Daniel, as if he mattered. He learned the art of silence. He kept his head down, shrinking into himself, counting down the hours until he could return to his mansion, a place filled with staff who answered his needs, but never asked about his heart. There were marble floors, chandeliers, and priceless paintings on the walls, but no warmth, no laughter, and no companionship. Loneliness echoed through every corner of that vast house, and Daniel carried that emptiness back into school every day. He had everything money could buy, but none of what a child craves most: belonging. And it was in this world of absence that a girl named Layla appeared. Layla was different from anyone Daniel had ever known. She transferred into the school mid-year, a sudden presence in a place that rarely changed. She came from the other side of the city, from a world of small apartments and long days where her mother worked tirelessly just to make ends meet. She did not arrive in expensive cars or with brand new clothes. Her shoes were scuffed, her backpack worn, but her spirit carried something rare: boldness, laughter, and compassion. She looked at Daniel and saw not his limp, not his father's fortune, not the isolation he carried like a shadow, but a boy. And though she could not have known it then, her presence would challenge the walls that had been built around Daniel's life, walls of privilege, silence, and fear. From that moment, everything began to change. Layla was the granddaughter of a retired factory worker, a man whose hands carried the scars of decades spent on assembly lines, providing for a family with sweat and sacrifice. She was raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day and waiting tables at night, and still managed to keep food on the table for her children. Layla grew up in a neighborhood where the sidewalks were cracked, the streetlights often broken, and the newspapers only ever arrived to report on crime. But in that overlooked corner of the city, Layla learned resilience. Her school clothes were second-hand, passed down from cousins and stitched back together when they tore. Her backpack was patched so many times it became a symbol of her persistence. Yet her spirit was unbroken. She was loud when she needed to be, fierce when she had to be, and soft only with those she trusted. From a young age, she had learned to fight, not with fists, but with her voice, her wit, and her unyielding will. She defended her younger siblings against bullies in the neighborhood, and she carried that strength with her when she stepped through the marble halls of the private school where Daniel had spent his years in silence. On her very first day, Layla noticed what others ignored. She scanned the cafeteria filled with cliques and chatter, and her eyes fell on a boy sitting by himself at the end of a long, polished table. Daniel. His head was bent over a book, his tray half empty, and not a single student near him. She asked a classmate casually why no one sat with him. The reply came as if it were obvious: no one plays with him. The words were tossed out carelessly, as if they explained everything, as if this unwritten rule did not need questioning. But Layla was not a girl who accepted rules that made no sense. She had never lived her life by the expectations of others, and she would not start now. So she walked across that cafeteria, pulled out a chair, and sat down beside Daniel. Whispers rose immediately, like the hiss of wind through broken glass. Eyes turned, eyebrows raised, and a ripple of disbelief spread across the room. No one had done this before. But Layla paid them no attention. She greeted him like she had greeted countless new faces before, asked him what he was reading, and made a small joke about the lopsided sandwich she had in her hand. At first, Daniel stared, uncertain, as though waiting for the cruel punchline that always came. But it never did. She smiled at him, patient, waiting for him to speak. And slowly, he did. That first conversation was simple, almost ordinary. A book, a sandwich, a laugh. But for Daniel, it was extraordinary. It was the first time in years that someone looked at him without pity, without cruelty, and without the filter of his father's fortune. In Layla's eyes, he was just Daniel, not the billionaire's son, not the boy with the limp, just a boy with a mind, a voice, and a heart worth knowing. And from that moment, though neither of them fully realized it yet, their lives were bound together. What began with a single chair pulled out in a crowded cafeteria would soon grow into a friendship that defied expectations, and in doing so, it would challenge everything around them. Their friendship began as something fragile, yet it grew with a quiet force neither of them expected. They walked side by side to class, Layla speaking boldly where Daniel stayed quiet, and when cruel whispers circled, she silenced them with a glance or a sharp word. Daniel, in turn, opened pieces of his world to her. Stories of vast dining rooms lit by chandeliers, and gardens so wide they swallowed the horizon. Layla listened, not with envy, but with curiosity, reminding him that even the grandest mansion could feel empty without laughter inside it. But not everyone approved. Parents questioned why a girl from her neighborhood belonged so close to the billionaire's heir. Classmates teased Daniel more cruelly, accusing him of leaning on her strength. Even the principal warned Layla to choose her friends carefully. And then, one evening, Daniel's father learned her name. To him, Layla was no friend, she was a problem. A quiet storm was beginning, one that would soon test how much two children could endure against the weight of reputation and power. Layla was called into the headmaster's office where Richard Langston was waiting. His words were polite but heavy, the tone of a man who expected to be obeyed. He told her Daniel did not need pity, and he warned her to remember her place. Layla stood her ground. She said Daniel was her friend and she would not walk away. That day, Daniel discovered what he had long feared. His father valued image above his happiness. But Richard's disapproval was more than pride. It was fear. Fear that Layla saw what no one else dared to admit, that his son was not broken by his leg but by the loneliness forced upon him. For years, Richard had hidden Daniel's vulnerability, guarding the family's image like a fortress. Layla's friendship threatened to shatter that illusion, and Richard Langston would not allow that to happen. The friendship between Daniel and Layla endured. They faced whispers in the hallways, teachers who turned away, and classmates who mocked more loudly than before. Yet they also shared small triumphs, a project they won together, afternoons in the library where the world could not touch them. Slowly, the walls around Daniel began to fall, not because Richard Langston allowed it, but because one girl refused to abandon him. Years later, Daniel was remembered not only as the billionaire's son with one leg, but as the boy who was finally seen. And he was seen because Layla sat beside him when no one else would. Her defiance became a story retold, a reminder that true power is not wealth, but the courage to give someone belonging. So we leave you with this. When the world has already decided who is worth sitting beside, what choice would you make? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories like this one.